And we are back on the chosen journey with Steve Karsay. Steve, welcome back, my friend. How's your week been?
It's been great. Good to see you again. A lot of baseball going on, and a lot of stuff. It's fun to watch in these series.
How are the Thunderdogs doing?
The Thunderdogs are having a little bit of a rough go. We haven't really played well early in the season, but that's okay. The young men are still competing very hard and playing well. We got rained out this past Sunday, but overall, uh, you know, as tough as it's been very rewarding to watch the boys compete.
Well, that's great to hear. And it's funny as a segue, there's always seems to be segues. Talking about teams that have fun and play hard, but and compete, but don't always get the results. That's the theme of today's episode. Now, I'm gonna let some teams have a bye here, if that's okay with you. The Rays, the Mariners. I don't think we expected them to finish in the Final Four. I think their fans were thrilled to see them make the playoffs. They obviously wanted to see them go farther, but it's not like there's going to be a huge amount of disappointment. The Guardians came that close to taking the Yanks. We actually thought they were going to do it. They did not, but it's not a huge surprise. Like, I think all their fans can hold their head up high and say, hey, you know what? From all the other teams in baseball, we made it, and we made it as far as we did. But there are teams that are not so happy right now. And there's a few of them in that category, and in no particular order. I thought it'd be interesting to take a look back. You having watched the season as you did, thinking what went right and then what went wrong. Is it just bad luck, or was it the fate against them, or they just faced a better team? And first and foremost, I want to lump them together. Is that terrible but strong NL East, and it's the Braves and the Mets. Now they were neck and neck right to the end of the year, and one was going to get a bye, and one had to face in the wild card, and both of them got shellacked and are not in the Final Four. Steve, how is this possible? The defending World Series champs, the Mets being as strong as they were with their embarrassment of riches for starting pitchers, they seem to be firing on all cylinders. Going with each of these teams, why are they not in the Final Four right now?
Well, it's baseball, right? Like we've always discussed. It's easy to play the game on paper and see stats and see it, but there's a human element to the game, and when the games start in the postseason, it's anybody's game. I think just watching the Mets when they played San Diego pitched really well. The bullpen didn't give up anything. So if the Mets didn't jump out and hold a lead, that was part of maybe the formula to beat the Mets. Scherzer, you expected him to have a great game one, right? San Diego came out and put it on him and got out. And once you do that to a team like the Mets, especially if you're San Diego, uh, you gain a lot of confidence and you're like, hey, man, we just beat one of the best starting pitchers in all of baseball. And now we have confidence. So, I think the Mets just ran into a buzzsaw. I think the Padres were pitching really well at the time. And, we're fortunate enough to, go ahead and beat them and knock them out. I think Seattle was very similar with the Blue Jays. I think Seattle came into it. They had a great game one. And then that game two where they came back, right? Or game three where they came back and scored all of those runs when the Blue Jays felt like they had that game. Uh, it was incredible turnaround. So, um, you know, at the end of the day, it's just one of those things in baseball is uh, the regular season is great, but if you're turning the page when you go into October and you get off to a hot start and a good start, then that can roll you and help you on your bid to go get a world championship.
Now, explain to the layman baseball fan how this kind of works because not all of us get it. But you follow a formula for 162 games. Your starting pitchers going X amount of pitches or X amount of innings. You have your people with your defined roles. All of a sudden, the playoffs come to like, you know what? This all worked with us all year, but you know what? I'm gonna bring my ninth inning guy in the seventh and see if he can pitch two and a half innings. And this one starting pitcher you know what, he's not going for a couple days. I'll bring him in emergency in the eighth inning, and tends to fail more than succeed. Why do managers all of a sudden gamble when they know they've had the formula the whole time? It's like that guy playing roulette or a woman playing roulette and has their system. And as they're up a bit, they're like, you know what? I'll deviate the system because it's going to work. Why don't they stick to the formula, Steve?
That's a great question. I think now more than in the past, front offices get more involved. They're in front of the computer with analytics. The numbers are starting to dictate a little bit more of how you can script the game. Unfortunately, scripting a game, you just don't know how that player is going to react or what you're going to get in a certain player when the game starts. I mean, I think in the Mets series, right? You thought Scherzer could go 6 or 7 innings. That didn't go so well. So you can't take away the human element in the game of how a player is going to do. You can try to have a plan, in my opinion, going into the game and then deviate from that plan if you need to. But just to follow the numbers and just to follow the analytical information is really tough to do, especially like you said, when you had that really good formula during the regular season on where guys need to pitch and where guys are comfortable pitching and what their job is to help the team win.
And look at the Jays of Romano, is one of the top closers in baseball. We'll talk about that next week. But playoffs, you never know. Look at even Verlander's ERA in the playoffs. Hasn't been that great till now. But again, now these teams that had high hopes, now they got to go and reassess going into the offseason. And taking aside the Mets for one moment, the Jays and the Braves, for example, I think are both well constructed, nice mix. Let's just take aside free agency right now. If you could trot out both of those rosters exactly the way they are, I think you're doing it. I don't think the playoffs expose any particular holes or weaknesses. It's just both teams it just didn't seem to go their way.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. It didn't go their way. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more information when you go into a 3 game series of how you're going to pitch a certain team, during that series. And it's a lot more detailed than maybe what it would be during the regular season. You have so many games against these teams during the regular season. It's going to sway one way or another. But in a 3 game series, you really have a plan of attack going in there. And if you're able to execute that plan, you're going to be better off than not.
Is John Schneider back with the Jays in your estimation?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's had those guys, and I think what he did, this year and getting them, it's an experience thing too, right? I mean, the more you play and the more you gain that experience in the playoffs, the better off you're going to be in the future. So I think he comes back. I think there's, he's well respected, and I think that he gets the opportunity to lead that ball club again.
When the decisions go well, you're a genius, and if they don't, you're an idiot. That seems to be baseball. The Yankees changed their starting pitcher because of the rain the day before, and Aaron Boone, I think, saved his job. That's the talk now. No matter what happens now in the playoffs, he made it to the Final Four. He's back next year. If they get bounced, probably out. It's a funny game that way. But you've always said that it's easier to change one guy than change 25, and that's the logic there. And I think the Phillies, I respect Girardi. I think he's shown to be a great baseball guy. They brought him in for a reason, but for whatever, the mix didn't go, and Robbie Thompson's in there, and they seem to be gelling for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when you get a different voice in the clubhouse with players, the chemistry is important. I obviously am not inside in any of these clubhouses, and don't know like what the chemistry is, but when you see a change made like that, and then you see a team start to take off, there's something to be said about that. I know Robbie, is fairly laid back. He's a player's manager, and the players really like him. He's never had an opportunity to be a manager prior to, getting the intern job, and now ultimately signing a 2 year deal and becoming the Phillies manager for the next couple of years. I think he's done a tremendous job, and like I said, I just think the change and the voice in the clubhouse sometimes makes a big difference on a team that's struggling.
I think Thompson and Schneider both have that appearance of those baseball lifer guys, coached at all ranks, always have their eye in the game, their nose in the game, always talking to the players. You love to see that, those guys that put in their dues and get the rewards. A guy that has had a lot of success, but they say this despite of himself, not because of, is the Dodgers. And Dave Roberts going to come back. They said fans are up in arms over that, saying the Dodgers should have won 1,000 World Series by now. Look at our payroll, look at our talent. What the heck happened in La La Land this year, Steve?
Yeah, well, in LA, I think as well as they did in winning 111 games, really rolling through that season, health played a little bit of a part in that. And then again, like we just talked about a little bit earlier, I think the formula in the playoffs for them maybe is not as well regarded after losing this past series is what they thought. Using the analytical information is great, but when you have a guy that has 5 shutout innings and a pitch count in the mid 70s, and you pull him to get to your bullpen, you got to rely on 4 guys to have their best days. If one guy throws a wrench in the program because he's not on or he doesn't have his best stuff that day, you saw what can happen, as opposed to a guy who has a rhythm in the game, has pitched 5 shutout innings. It almost feels to me like the game yesterday, when I'm watching, the Phillies and San Diego. Would you ever take Zach Wheeler out after 5 innings when he's given up 1 hit through 5? No, you ride him as long as you can, and he went 7 innings. He got you deeper in the game, and you got to use your 2 best arms at the back end. And maybe if the Dodgers let Anderson throw a couple more innings, maybe they're in a different situation with some of the guys that they could use at their back end. But at the end of the day, that's the plan that they went in there with, and that's what they have to live with. And maybe they'll change it in the future. If they're in that position, maybe they won't, but time will tell.
And like you're saying, how many games he won them this year? It's hard to ignore that. And is it the body of work in the regular season, the body of work in the playoffs? Is it both? All I'll say is this much: with that payroll and the expectations, he's got to have a short leash. Like any hint of any not winning the World Series, like it's basically going to be World Series or bust. Like if he does not win the series next year, I think he's gone, unfortunately. And very respected guy. The players love playing for him. He has a very good reputation in general. Just LA Dodgers fans need to vent onto somebody, so he's going to receive it. And the other team I'm thinking of was my World Series pick. I said the team of destiny this year was going to be the St. Louis Cardinals, and they bowed out very quickly. And it just seems like somebody took a pin and deflated the balloon, and the magic was just gone. Like Aaron Judge, everybody was so in love with the home run chase, and we were so obsessed with it. Yet playoffs start, and they were booing him all of a sudden out of nowhere. It like blew my mind. And Albert Pujols, this like fantastic story and legends, and 700 home runs, and quietly just went home and just like he had his bag packed at the Sheraton and he was ready to go. And same thing with Molina, and it was done. And we expect so much out of them. And at some point, Steve, speaking as a former player, when you're chasing any kind of personal milestones, or you're on such a high adrenaline, at some point you get tired, right? It can't go 120 all the time.
Yeah, mentally it's a grind. It really is. I mean, that's why guys need breaks at some point and just have a day off to kind of recharge and refresh. And that's what the built in off days are for. But when you play 162 games, your mind is going all the time. You have to be able to make adjustments. You have to be able to figure out what's wrong with your swing on the offensive side, or your mechanics, if you're a pitcher. Defensively is pretty straight across the board. Is you take your ground balls every day, and your defensive metrics are what they are. But uh, you know, hitting is such a feel as pitching. It's ups and downs, and it's the guys who are most consistent. And you're not going to be able to square up the ball and hit the ball, the way you want over the course of 162 games. It just doesn't. It just doesn't happen. So for the guys who are able to handle the mental side of the game, at a faster pace, they're the ones that are better off and get out of those slumps a little bit quicker.
And so with finishing off on the Dodgers, we were talking about the Cards now, but just finishing up on the Dodgers, and I assume no real wholesale changes. They're going to trot out the same lineup, the same roster as much as they can with the amount of wins they had in the regular season, and kind of try it again. You would say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's a couple free agents there. Trey Turner's a free agent. Are they going to bring him back or not at shortstop? There's a couple other guys out there that they might have interest in. Justin Turner, I think they got an option on his contract. Do they want to pay him that much money, or do they want to slide somebody else in that's a little bit cheaper to control payroll costs? But they are the Dodgers, right? They have enough money. They can do what they want. And I just think that maybe they've learned a lesson about bolstering their pitching staff and just being a little bit deeper, throughout the year and able to kind of fill in guys when needed if some injuries occur.
And we will talk about the bullpen. We will get to that next week, I promise. And because they're definitely one team that thought about a lot, and how much their bullpen affects. And it seems like it's almost like having that rock at the end of your bullpen. It just gives people confidence. That's the perception, at least. When you have a Class A in there and you're the Guardians, you feel like, I get to the night, I'm winning that game. There's a nice high feeling for that. The Cards, though, they're going to have a very different look this year going into 2023, because the two cornerstones are going to retire. They're going to be gone. Molina won't be in that clubhouse anymore. Pujols was back. Now he's gone. This is Goldschmidt's team. This is Arenado's team. A very different feeling in St. Louis. Fans thought that they had committed highway robbery. I thought they committed highway robbery with the when Montgomery was pitching like Cy Young there for a couple of days. And Bader has shown why Cashman and the Yanks know what they're doing, and they are celebrating him in the streets. He's been a rock for them in center field. He's hit key home runs. Like, it's just been amazing to watch. So for St. Louis's perspective now, going into, you're like, okay, Montgomery was great for us, but he was human. And man, how good would Bader look in our lineup again? So now we don't have Bader, we don't have Pujols, we don't have Molina. How much retooling do you think St. Louis has to do, or do you think the core is still there in your estimation?
I think the core is still there. I mean, they got the decision on Wainwright, if Wainwright's coming back or not on that staff. But they have Quintana, they have Montgomery, they have some of these young guys. Flaherty, if he's healthy, coming back next year, see where he's at. But at the end of the day, I think they're in a good spot. They still have flexibility in their payroll to be able to do some things and fill some holes. Helsley, really good at the back end, had a tremendous year this year. Gallegos setting up. They have a ton of guys that are cornerstones, and now I think they just need to fill in the pieces of where they feel like they need to improve.
So I think the one team which I thought was going to go a lot farther than they were, because of their pitching staff, were the Mets, and they're going to have a lot of decisions to make. I mean, almost their whole starting staff is a free agent this year, and they have an owner with deep pockets who says that he wants to invest and will do whatever it takes. But I don't know if everybody's coming back, Steve. And compared to the Braves, who have their core intact, I think the Mets have some work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The Mets definitely have some work to do. I think, again, the pitching staff is going to be the biggest question mark, right? I mean, Diaz is a free agent. DeGrom is one who's probably going to market. Obviously, there's a lot of factors in that and where he's going to go. But I think Taijuan Walker is free to leave if he wants via free agency.
Correct.
Scherzer's going to be there. And a
I think
couple of their other
I think
guys.
Carrasco's a free agent as well. I think they're
I think
all.
I think so
Yeah.
too. Yeah, so I think they got question marks. There's no doubt about that. They're a very good team. I think Nemo. I mean, he's a big part of that team. That he's going to be a free agent as well. So lots of questions, some answers we'll get to as the offseason goes on after the World Series. But the Braves are one team in that division that has locked up a lot of their young core players. The only player in Atlanta is Swanson, that they might have to try to re-sign and keep to that core. But I think the Braves are in a much better position right now than the Mets.
Well, our sources are telling us that Texas has a bunch of people parked outside Kershaw and DeGrom's homes, and they're just waiting patiently to the free agency period to start. And then at 12:01, they're gonna be knocking on the door. So there's gonna be a few guys that are gonna be cashing in this offseason big time. And fans of those cities are asking, are they coming back to us? With Kershaw, it's an interesting one because he lives just outside the stadium there in Texas. And does he go home, be close to his family? Or does he play with the only team that he ever knows? That's one I wanted to ask you without knowing him or knowing his situation. If you're a betting man, as I have an idea of where I think he's going, you see him going back to the Dodgers, or is he going to play a final season close to home?
He goes back to the Dodgers. There's something to be said about playing for one team your whole career, and at the very end, it's not about money at this point. He's made enough money in his career that he doesn't need a team like Texas to outbid the Dodgers for $3 or $4 million. It is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, what he has earned and what his stature is in Dodger lore will always be there. And I think at the end of the day, he will finish his career with the Dodgers and hang him up in Dodger blue.
I agree 1,000% with you. That's where I see it going on so many levels. There's this mystique and allure about being with one team for those guys, the Robin Younts, the Cal Ripkins of this world. And it's just, there's something special about it. And when it comes time to go to Cooperstown, there's only one hat to wear. I love that. But, and especially in this day and age, we're going to see that less and less and less with the age of free agency and, service time and payrolls and the salary caps and penalties. Those all dig into it, but definitely would like to see him end his career, same way Molina did with the Cards. But I do see him coming back for one more year for sure. DeGrom, I don't know. I don't really have a read on it. Only he knows on that one. And to me, there's a thing as far as, do you love playing for the Mets? Do you love New York? Is that your thing? Is it about money? What drives you? And people don't, I think, realize that they always think it's just dollars or just the ballpark or just team. There's a lot more that goes into it, eh, Steve?
There is definitely a lot more that goes into it. I think he's comfortable where he's at in New York. I think he's been there his whole career as well, right? So, um, he deserves to be paid like one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball on AAV. And if I was a betting man and guessing where DeGrom would end up, I think he's going to end up back with the Mets. He's going to finish his career with the Mets, and he will end up getting somewhere in the range of 3 years and 150 million.
When Wheeler's gone, when Syndergaard left, I think that became his de facto team. And you can speak of this when a big free agent and an experienced veteran like Scherzer shows up. Is it such a thing as it's Scherzer's team, it's DeGrom's team, or does it not really work that way?
It doesn't really work that way. Everybody in the clubhouse, everybody in the stadium knows whose team it is. At the end of the day, it's really hard as good of a player as Scherzer is, or anybody. It's Corey Seager, same thing, right? All that money that he got from Texas, and it maybe is his team because there isn't anybody in Texas that is kind of that guy anymore. But you just don't walk into another team after you haven't been there, no matter how much money you're making, and saying, it's my team. You have to earn the respect of the other players in the clubhouse, no matter how good you are. And at the end of the day, I just think that he wants to be on a team that is going to win. I'm talking about Scherzer, whether he's the cornerstone of that team or not.
Well, I think this is a great place to pause because next week we're going to be talking about the player carousel that is called the closer. In the age of holds and all sorts of stats, there's still something sexy about those saves and those closers. We'll talk about the top closers of baseball in 2022 when we return. So, Steve, always a pleasure, my friend. And thank you very much for those insights. And let's see how many of our predictions come true come spring training.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun watching it. Great to be with you as always, and looking forward to the next episode.
Sounds great. Thank you.